we've covered the move, copy, and rotate and mirror modifiers or modifying tools, we're going to go over scale. So now, say I have this polyline right over here and I want to rescale it. I want it to be either bigger or smaller. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to escape everything, so I remove any selections I have, and then type SC for scale. Then hit enter. So now I have the scale command activated, and it's asking me to select the object. So I'm going to select this polyline right over here. And once I'm done selecting, I'm going to right click to tell AutoCAD that this is the only object I want to rescale. And then it says specify the base point. So I want the base point to be here. So this is a point that does not move. Okay? Just a single short click. And then it says specify the scale factor. So I can make it twice as big or half as small. So I can say I want this square to be 0.5 by starting to type 0.5 on my screen right now, and it becomes half as big as the original square or the rectangle. So if I want it to be twice as big again, then I'm going to escape everything, type SC again for scale, hit the enter button, and then place a short click on the object that I want to rescale. And then I'm going to right click. The base point is this one, and I want it to be twice as big to bring it back to its original size. So this is the scale button or the scale command. The next command that we're going to be addressing is the mirror command. The trim command. So TR for trim. Now, you know when you go to the hair salon and you ask them to trim your hair, you're not asking them to make a full cut. So you're only trimming, you're only removing bits and pieces of the hair, and that is similar to lines. So right now we need to trim some of the lines, so we're not completely removing the lines, we're only removing a part of it. Now, one important note is that in order to be able to trim a line, you need to have intersections. Okay, so you can't trim this line simply because there's no intersection, there's no border, so you'll be erasing it and not trimming it. But you can trim this part of the line because there is a border, or that part of the line, or this part of the line, and that's perfectly fine. So just one thing to keep in mind: if you can't trim, so check your borders. Do you have any intersecting lines? Only then can trim work. So we're going to go back and activate the trim command, TR for trim, and you're going to hit the enter button. It's now asking you to start selecting the objects that you wish to trim or the objects that you wish to cut. And this is our trim command. Now, if you're using an older version, as I said, this is 2022 version. If you're using an older version, it will ask you to select boundaries first. So once you hit trim, just double click on the space button or the enter buttons, just so you can start selecting your trimmed object as we are doing right now. Our next command is going to be the fillet command, and now we need to notice that these lines, I'm going to assume that this line is shorter and I want it to continue. So I want these lines to automatically be extended so that they meet each other. So I'm going to use the fillet command. F is for fillet, and I'm going to select these objects, this line and this line, because I want AutoCAD to continue them and connect them. So notice how the angle at which they met is a perfectly right angle. Now, can I make it a curve? Of course I can, by using the fillet command again. And then before I start selecting my objects, I need to choose to change the radius. So R, and you can notice how here the blue letter is the letter that if you type will get you into that option. So R is for radius, to be able to change the radius. I'm going to hit enter. Once I hit enter, it's asking me to specify the fillet radius. So now I can specify the radius at the curve at which these two lines are going to be meeting. So I'm going to type 5 right over here, and I'm going to start selecting my objects after I hit the enter button. I wanted to fillet this line with that one, and notice how they're now joined with a curve. To change this back into a right angle, again, F for fillet, enter. And then before you start specifying objects, you just hit the R button on your keyboard for radius, and then you hit enter. Right now it's asking you to specify the radius, and the default right now is 5. I'm going to change that to 0, and I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to start selecting my lines, and notice how the lines are joined with a 0 radius. That means it's a 90-degree angle. Now I can safely erase this curve, and my lines are back to being square-like lines. Next is the array. To tell you the truth, I don't normally use arrays a lot, but I'm just going to give you a quick introduction to arrays and how you can use them. So I'm going to draw a polyline just to show you how it's going to look like in an array. So I'm going to make it look like this. And now I'm going to start typing array, A-R-R-A-Y for array. And remember that array is when you place an items according to a specific order. In a rectangular array, you are arranging your items in columns and arrays. So I'm going to select these objects as the command line is asking me to select. I'm going to select this polyline. Once I'm done selecting, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to choose rectangular right over here. And you can see how it has automatically arranged my objects in rows and columns. Now, it's still asking me to select the grip or edit the array or start editing my objects. So right now I want to increase the number of columns by selecting on this arrow that I selected, the blue arrow, and then I can start moving my cursor so that I edit the number of columns. And then if I click on this little arrow right here, the blue one, I can also increase the number of rows that I have. Now, alternatively, if I click on COL, as you can see at the bottom, COL, I can start editing the numbers of columns that I have, and say I want them to be 5 columns, and then the distance between each column and the next is 10. You can see how my objects are too big, so I'm going to change that and make it, I'm going to go back to the column, editing column mode, and keep it 5 columns. And then I'm going to edit the distance to be 50. You can see how they're getting farther away from each other. Now if I click on R for rows, I can edit the number of rows, and that is 2, for instance. And the distance can be, say, 80. You can see they're getting farther away from each other. So that helps me with my array. Once I'm done, I just click the enter button to exit the command, and my array is there. Now notice that these objects are now treated as one single object, and you need to make sure that this is what you want before you start editing and before you start drawing. Now to edit the array, you can just click on it right over here, and it automatically takes you to an array tab, and you can edit the number of rows, make it 5, and then edit the distances, make it 60, and edit the columns, make them 10, and change the distances between the columns and make it 30, and so on. Once you're happy with your array, you just click on close array, and you have your array ready to work with. Next is our offset. Let me just explode this. I'm going to type X for explode. And once I select the object that I want to explode, I'm just going to right click, and it should explode. It has exploded my array into single polylines. If I further explode each object, you can see that it explodes it from polylines to single lines. And you can see that now this is made up of single lines. I'm going to erase most of these objects just so we can understand the fillet. I'm going to erase this as well, and I'm going to draw a new polyline that is, say, 50 units up, 100 units to the side, 50 units down, and then I'm closing it so that I have a rectangle. And I'm going to start offsetting. So offsets, O is for offset. Offset copies the object either to the outside or to the inside, and you'll see how in a minute. So now it says specify the offset distance. So what is the distance that you want to have between the original and the new versions? So say I want it to be 300 units away, and then it says select the object that you want to offset. So I'm going to short click on the object, And I'm gonna click on the outside of that square. You can see that if I zoom in, a new copy of that square is made, so that there is 300 units between this original line and this new line. I'm gonna repeat this with a smaller number so it makes it easier for you to understand. So that's O for offset. Specify the distance. Let's make the distance 10, and then hit enter. And then I'm gonna select my object. I can either press outside if I want the new version to be on the outside, or inside if I want the new version to be on the inside. And there I have my line. I'm gonna stop the recording here, and please keep watching to understand the next layer, or the next thing that you have to understand for the assignment. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.